Hi, welcome to The Rewrite with Sammy. Today, this is part 2 of our chat with Danielle Binks. She's an author, an literary agent, and a teacher. And last time we focused more about her role as an agent and tips for writers and finding their voice. And on this episode, we'll be focused more on Danielle's own journey as a writer. Does she have a literary agent? What does that look like? We also talk about literacy, especially in Australia, and a little bit on AI in publishing too. Hope you enjoy. How did you land on writing middle grade books?
That was that thing of Miles Davis saying, man, it takes you a long time to sound like yourself. I was obsessed with Twilight. I was obsessed with Charlene Harris and Sookie Stackhouse.
Yes.
True Blood.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with paranormal romance and urban fantasy. So I totally get the romantasy craze right now because I was in it when it was paranormal vampires and werewolves. I understand.
Yes.
That's all that I was reading. That's all that I was writing for a really long time. And then I had to accept that it wasn't working. It didn't sound good. I was sounding like a complete mimic. So I took a little while and I kind of checked in with myself as an artist and I started reading widely again in a way that I hadn't read widely since high school, probably having to read, different texts for curriculum. And one of the things that I read, I wanted to investigate this readership called middle grade fiction from the US. And I did so by reading the shortlisted books from something called the Newbery Medal, which is their book award for middle grade fiction. So I started reading a lot of those books just to investigate what the heck is this? Yeah. And there were, 2 or 3 authors and books that I read. I read Rebecca Stead's When You Reach Me. I read Sharon Creech's Walk Two Moons. And I read every single book by Gary D. Schmidt. And all 3 of them were kind of contemporary. Very much focused on family and big emotions like grief or change, first fluttering feelings of romance, etc. All very much in that middle grade space. And I remember reading all of them and Rebecca Stead's When You Reach Me in particular. And it just was like the heart was calling to me. It was just like it reverberated. I was back to being 12 years old. I could just be in that character because I could remember what it was like to be 12. And a little part of me sort of went, is this my voice? Is this actually my genre and readership? Should I try writing in it? And for a little while with The Year the Map Changed, I even tried writing that as a teenage boy, as like a 17-year-old male character, because I still loved YA. That didn't work. And I can only presume it didn't work because I didn't terribly want to be in the mind of a 17-year-old boy for a long period of time. But as soon as I kind of said, what if I write this from a 12-year-old girl's perspective? It just kind of poured out of me. And for The Year the Map Changed in particular, which is set in 1999, and it deals with real events of the Kosovo War when refugees came to the Mornington Peninsula and were housed at the Point Nepean quarantine station, in fact. I gave a lot of myself to that protagonist because I was also a 12-year-old girl in 1999, wearing lip smackers, going and seeing 10 Things I Hate About You in cinemas for the first time, meeting Heath Ledger for the first time in cinemas and being, transformed. Suddenly it just poured out of me because I think that memories of that time in my life were just still very close to the bone. I really feel like that was just a point where I was really being made as myself. So when I tap back into that, when I read in that category, when I write in that category, it's just very easy for me to slip into that mentality again because I think it was just very, it's just memories and moments that have still really stuck to me and imprinted on me. So I love tapping into them. But it was when I started reading more widely and then I read these kind of foundational books that introduced me to the readership and the genre that I had never tried my voice in before. And suddenly it was kind of like throwing an echo out and hearing it come back for the first time, like a bit of a boomerang. Yeah. So I really suddenly enjoyed writing in a way that I hadn't previously. Previously, it had been a bit of a slog because I kind of knew that my voice wasn't really suited to what I was writing. But writing middle grade contemporary, it felt like myself.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's brilliant. And
I would say, and I tell this to all of my writing students as well, if you don't yet think, but I mean, also some people just really do think, I am writing paranormal romance. That's what I'm going to be published in. And I think it's not until you start reading more widely that you realize I could be anything. Everything is open to me. I'm not any one singular thing. I shouldn't put myself into a box and tie it up with a bow and say, now I'm done. I'm never going to evolve as an artist. I still think you should probably read widely if you want to be a writer, because I think every single genre and form can teach you something.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think for me, so I have landed on rom-com.
Mm-hmm.
That is my voice. And I did it without knowing that I wasn't intentionally doing it, but I had got developmental feedback on a manuscript, and they're like, you know that you've written like half women's fiction, but like half rom-com here. And I was like, oh, have I? And that's when I started to, read more widely, but then narrowly in rom-coms and go, oh yeah, I love this. And you're right. Then it sort of pours out of you and sort of, it's a nice moment. It feels really cool. So
I also kind of prescribe to my students in particular, and there's this kind of saying, you have to pay attention to what you pay attention to. So you should really look at what are the films and the TV shows that genuinely have made you, because we're all sort of made up of pop culture fragments, right? So what are the films and TV shows that have really gone a long way into forming you as a person? Does that tell you a little bit about maybe where your mind goes? And and I just think like romance is one of my all-time favorite genres. And it's one that I tell everyone they should read, because especially if you're going to write crime, for instance, I say you should read romance. Because the same way that everyone who picks up a crime novel knows how it's going to end with the mystery solved, you should ask yourself, well, why does every romance reader persevere with a book when we all know it's going to end happily? By virtue of it being a romance. And we do it because something in what they're writing and the pace of it keeps us turning the pages. So they can teach you something. The same way that I think if you're a romance writer, read crime novels, because it's beautiful pacing for every single clue. The same way that a relationship can kind of understanding another person can be a bit of a clue-seeking mission. So, that's what I tell everyone. Read more widely, but also pay attention to what you pay attention to. And if you realize, wow, I'm reading only romantasy, so no wonder that's all that I'm writing. What if I go a little bit further afield? But at the same time, if you realize, oh, these are the 5 movies that I think really make me a person, that really inform my outlook on the world, that might inform a little bit about the trajectory of your art as well. So pay attention to what you pay attention to is a really good little test as an artist.
I'm going to go away and do that as an exercise.
Yeah. I mean, I do it constantly. I looked at, when I realized I loved middle grade, I kind of looked at 5 movies that kind of, or maybe even top 3 movies that I would say explain me as a person. One of them was My Girl. One of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
A little known movie that I think every probably millennial girl grew up with, Now and Then, Christina Ricci, Now and Then, like one of my favorite films of all time, and the Stephen King adaptation, Stand By Me. Like those 3 films, like top favorite films. And I look back at them and I go, oh, they're all about that kind of cusp moment of tween into teenage, of being a child and then realizing more adult things ever so slowly. And they're very focused on family and friendship, and grief kind of runs through them as well. And a little bit of historic to them as well, like a little bit of old settings. And that's what I write now. And I kind of go, oh, wow, pay attention to what you pay attention to. I realized that those were foundational texts for me. They very much formed who I am as a person and as an artist. That's incredible.
Wow. And actually, my next question was going to be, can you share a little bit about Shakespeare in the Orchid and what's that about?
This book that I happen to have right here.
Amazing.
Yes, absolutely. It is an Australian World War I historical, and it's an Australian homefront story inspired by real events. And for anyone in Victoria and on the Mornington Peninsula, and specifically in Langwarrin, it's set in Langwarrin dealing with real events that happened there, which was we meet our 13 going on 14-year-old protagonist, Jack Thorning, who was in military cadets because, and here I can actually show you some visuals, because in Australia, every 12-year-old boy had to join their military cadets.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, they were all given, from 1912 right through World War I, they were all given rifles and taught how to use them. They had to be in military cadets. Wow. So in 1914, Jack Thorning's brother has gone off to fight in World War I. He's in military cadets and he hates the Germans. But then in Australia, the government announces that every single person in Australia with a German or Austro-Hungarian surname is going to be rounded up and locked up, because they are deemed enemy aliens. And it is, in fact, the first time in Australian history that we imprison civilians because of where they've come from. Not the last time. We'll do it again in World War II, again with Germans, but Italians and Japanese as well. But it happens for the first time in World War I. And one of the locations that German civilians are locked up purely for being German is Langwarrin at the military reserve. which is
Wow.
what really happened. And also what really happened and what Jack discovers, because his family orchard is across the way from the military reserve, which is where the German imprisoned camp is now. His family need the German prisoners to come and become sort of slave labor working his apple orchard at the time. And he overhears the German prisoners practicing and performing Shakespeare's Hamlet, which really discombobulates him, because how do these Germans know about Shakespeare? But this also really happened. German prisoners who were locked up really did put on elaborate performances because they were locked up for an indeterminate amount of time, and they were so bored, and they were from all different walks of life. They were tailors, they were milliners, they were dentists, they were carpenters. And they kind of realized they were so bored being locked up, but one thing that they could do is put on performances. So they really did put on theatrical plays and musicals to pass the time. And this is a book about a young boy who's in cadets, whose brother is off at war. He desperately wants to kill Germans to prove that he's a man. But then he realizes that these Germans who are working in his family's orchard are actually human.
Wow.
And they're practicing Shakespeare. And he starts to think, have I got this all wrong? Are we actually all just people? And that's kind of where the story goes.
Oh, wow. I love that. I actually, because I haven't read middle grade since probably I was in middle grade, but that's like, yeah, I can see how that would be such a compelling story for people at that age or any age. I feel I want to read this.
It's an interesting one as well to speak to young kids about it and say, could you imagine being given a rifle at the age of 12 and taught that you're going to be one of the first lines of defense if there was a war to happen? And they can't comprehend, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's going to happen. Bob Catter, mind you, was talking about bringing that back, bringing compulsory military cadet training back for 12-year-olds up until the age of 16, which is wild. But it really happened in 1914. And it really happened where I live in Langwarrin. And I've kind of gone through the history books and found that there were escape attempts at the military reserve amongst the German prisoners. There really were kind of beautiful and elaborate theatrical performances put on. And I just thought, wow, that's really interesting for a child. And I always like things that show a real disparity. So a child who's being taught violence at the same time that they're encountering art. And those two things are not going together with the enemy he's being taught to hate. He's seeing them as very human when he's been told that they are the enemy, they are the Hun, they are the Germans, they are enemy aliens, and it's just not computing. So I really like that moment as a young person where you kind of stop listening to what adults are forcing you to believe and you start questioning a little bit more. That's that tipping point, I think, from childhood to adulthood a little bit, or young adulthood, because you start realizing, oh, maybe I should start figuring things out for myself a little bit more and being curious. So I like that moment for kids when they start going, I'm going to choose to be curious and a bit more open-hearted.
Gosh, I think that's very profound. And I think, it feels like a pivotal point in someone's life, right? From childhood to adolescence. I saw in your Substack, you are an active advocate for children and reading. I feel like hearing you now, I can also understand where you're coming from, but would love to hear about your advocacy as well.
Yeah, I work with a charity organization called Human and Hope, who run the Chapters for Change Readathon every July, which is raising money to get better educational resources for children in Cambodia, for instance, because literacy rates in Cambodia are really abysmal, and it's part of the ongoing tragedy of the genocide that they all live through. Generationally, there's still scars from the genocide, and one of those scars is education is really poor in Cambodia, and resources for education are really, really poor. But particularly literacy is really low in Cambodia, so I'm part of an ambassadorship who is raising money for Cambodian schools to get more resources to teach reading and writing and literacy. So that hits really close to home. And I also am a huge advocate for youth literature in Australia and for acknowledging the ways that we need to invest in books and writing and publishing and public libraries and school libraries. And I think a wonderful campaign is Books Create Australia, which has been formed by a bunch of publishers and editors and booksellers who are telling government what they would like to see happen in our cultural and creative spaces. So in particular is more investment in public and school libraries. Because at the moment, not every public school has a school library. In fact, I go to many of them who do not have a single book on their school grounds because somebody has deemed it necessary to turn the entire library digital, or to think that they can just cut costs and not give children books via a library, let alone a teacher librarian. And we know every single study reading and writing results go way down when students do not have access to a library. So that's like a really, really, really big passion project of mine is Books Create Australia, and just talking widely about how incredible that campaign is and how we should be putting pressure on government that if we want to see an improvement in literacy rates across the country, which obviously has a run-on effect to democracy as well, because a well-read society is a more democratic society, is a society that has more media literacy, particularly at a time where we're seeing AI slop and a whole lot of, post-truth media, etc. So a well-read society is also a more functioning democratic one. So to do that, we should be investing in more public educational spaces like libraries.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, right? It makes total sense. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also another wonderful organisation called Australia Reads, which is a not-for-profit organisation mapping literacy rates in Australia. And I would just say a conversation that's kind of kicked off lately is this idea that reading has been gendered, like boys don't read as much as girls, or boys should read books by boys for boys, which is just ridiculous. But actually, the reading crisis in Australia is a generational one. Every subsequent generation is not reading as much as the last one. And where we're currently at with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, there's been a huge drop-off in literacy. And it's only going to get worse because of AI and devices, etc., and lack of funding in public and school libraries especially. So we have to have really honest conversations, because currently we are on track to, in about 10 or 20 years, seeing a majority of Australia who are functionally illiterate if we don't turn this around. And by functionally illiterate, I mean majority of people who could probably adeptly read a map on the metro, but couldn't go into a voting booth and pull out the pamphlet for voting and be able to adeptly fill it in, for instance. So that is frightening. That is anti-democratic. And we have to start talking right now about how do we turn around the literacy crisis in this country.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's such important work you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, anyone listening, just get really vocal if you hear your local government is not funding your public library anymore, or if you hear about any public schools who are cutting the budget to their school library, or who they don't have a school library. You've just got to get involved in this stuff. Stick your nose in, please, because I guarantee you there'll be a slew of teachers and parents who so appreciate that you're also talking up for those kids.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll make sure to include the resources as well that you mentioned in the organization. So
one more is Students Need School Libraries, a really great organization. If you need to turn for data and actual statistics about how NAPLAN results go down when there's no school library, turn to Students Need School Libraries. If you need to bring them to, a bit of a discussion night with school board.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay. What was the most unexpected thing you've experienced since being a published author?
I go to a lot of schools now, and sometimes I'll have students who approach me and they've done illustrations in my book, like little fan art drawings of the characters and things. And that's my favorite thing of all time, because I was scrolling through Tumblr as a teenager looking for fan art constantly. So the idea that anyone's written fan art about my book. And then I also have some students some of them have asked my permission to write fan fiction about my book. And I tell them, oh my gosh, you have no idea what that means to me as someone who used to write fan fiction. So yeah, just encountering anyone who loves my work that much is incredible. And still floors me to this day.
Okay. What's the hardest lesson you've learned as an agent?
It's the same one that my authors have to learn, which is to let something go. Everything that I pitch, I pitch with my whole heart, because I genuinely want to see it turn into a book. So when something doesn't get across the line, when it does get turned down, I'm as upset as my clients are. Obviously not as much as they are, but you have to learn to let things go. And I have to come back to that. I've signed this creator up because I believe in them as an artist, not because I believed in this one manuscript from them. So it's the lesson that I have to constantly learn as well, which is just to keep moving forward, which is hard. It's really hard to kill your darlings. I know.
And your favorite thing about being an author?
I really do enjoy talking to the kids. I really enjoy doing book clubs, doing school visits, and getting to talk to my actual audience, which I think is something that not every adult author gets to experience. I'm very lucky writing for kids that I get to go into schools and I get to actually meet and speak to my audience, and how funny they are, and how the things that they like in the book, the questions they ask me about the book, it's so interesting. So I never take it for granted that my audience is incredible. Their young people are really, really, really amazing, and I love writing for them, and I love getting to meet them. And it still floors me when they ask me very precise questions about on page 262. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this proof that you've read my book. I thank you so much.
I love that. What is the hardest lesson you've learned as an agent?
I think I'm learning it right now. Because I hate AI. And if I was Thanos from the MCU and I could snap my fingers and make AI disappear, I would. And I wouldn't even bemoan the monkey paw type consequence to that. But I think the hardest lesson I'm learning right now as an agent is if publishers could cut corners and cut authors out of the deal, they probably would. If they could be proven to make money off of AI, my fear is that they totally would, because the authors are the most annoying part of the process for them, right? They're the ones who demand that you protect their copyright and you give them money and you give them fair contracts. So my fear is that the first few AI to slip through and become really big and famous published books may very well convince publishers to keep going down that path, which I would be horrified by, both as an artist and as an agent, because I don't want to represent machines. I want to represent people. So I think the hardest lesson I'm learning right now is the realities of AI and how majority of society is also very accepting of it. I mean, I fear, because we're hearing this about some movies at the moment. There's a new movie coming out called The Ice Cream Man or something. And the awful director Eli Roth has admitted he's used AI for quite a few scenes. And I kind of mentioned this and I saw people mentioning it in comments, and so many people were replying, well, so what? If it's a good movie, who cares? And I just think, and is that the same response that they're going to have to books that are AI written? Are they going to turn around and say, well, if it's a good book, I don't really care if a robot wrote it or not? So I think the hardest lesson I'm learning right now is how little care there is to protect humans in the creative process. That's a lesson that I'm learning right now, and I'm doing everything in my power as an artist and as an agent and as a teacher as well, to reject AI in creative cultural spaces, because it has no point or purpose here and we shouldn't ever have to deal with it. But we unfortunately have to confront it, and that's the lesson that I'm unfortunately having to learn right now, though I hate it.
Yeah, I hope that people come to the conclusion that there is no replacement for human connection, but it's an evolving space for sure. Last question. What are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading at the moment? Okay, well, I feel like I have to say 2 books here, because I always have like one in the youth lit space and one in the adult space. So I'm going to say for the adult space, one of my favorite romance writers, you'll appreciate this, is Jodie McAllister.
Yeah.
So I'm reading her new one, A Study in Sparkling. I know Jodie as well, and she's just phenomenal. And she's also someone who's transitioned from writing like paranormal YA to now contemporary romances. She's had such a broad spectrum of a career now. I just love everything that she writes. Look at how pretty this is with the.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
So yeah, her latest one, A Study in Sparkling, because Jodie McAllister, one of Australia's best contemporary romance writers, who I'm just so thrilled for all of her success in this space. And then for middle grade, I'm reading, I love this title so much, The Grey Beret's Guide to Surviving the Odds by Anna Batiste, which is just the cutest middle grade book. It's very Wes Anderson vibes. If you love Wes Anderson vibe-ish, this is so great. It's so funny. It's so cute. They're like sweetest end papers that I've ever seen as well, illustrated by Erin Reeves. So I'm reading this from an Australian author and illustrator as well. Yeah, The Grey Berets. So good, both of those. I should do a little woohoo.
Yes, I can do a screenshot.
Aussie authors and no AI for the win. Heck yeah.
Woohoo. Yes, amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Danielle. I really appreciate it. And this has been given me so much to think about as well. So thank you.
So glad.